All right, everybody. I'd like to welcome Brian Morris and Ian McDonough with Executive Construction, Inc. They're here today to tell us a little bit about Executive, but also share with us some case studies on helicopter lifts.
Thanks, Mark. So just for those that are on the call, I'll quickly run through, give us a brief overview of Executive, some of the things we've done, kind of where we're at, to current market, kind of some of the high profile things we're working on now. So just a little bit about Executive Construction. So we were established in 1974. It's interesting. Our story is that we were originally, the original Executive Construction was a raised access flooring contractor in the data center world. And then our ownership changed hands in the 90s and became a full service general contractor. Some folks from Turner left Turner Construction and came over to Executive. And then the current leadership, our CEO, John Blackader, was one of those original owners that left Turner and came over and built us to what we are today. So core market. So our bread and butter is the tenant market in the Chicagoland area, or downtown Chicago. We are heavy in the renovation work out in the suburbs. Mission critical is another one of our obviously we started in that mission critical world, but now we've really blossomed there, and that market has become slowly creeping up to become one of our bread and butter. I mean, we're working, we just did a big data center in Hammond, Indiana. We've got a data center going on in Houston right now for Skybox, Houston, Texas. And then we're also doing some repeat mission critical work in the Virginia market. And then we also have new construction. We've been very successful, doing that, probably anywhere from 50 to 100 million a year in new construction. When the pandemic hit, the downtown market slowed, and we diversified, and we're doing some unique new construction opportunities around the Chicagoland area, which is we've been very fortunate with this new client that we've done work with. But those are our four core markets. Staff, we're sitting just north of 140. We're higher now, that we're higher than staff-wise than pre-pandemic levels. So things have come back full force, and we're very positive outlook on where things are going. So 2020, we did 265 million, and that's within that was within about a 30 to 50 mile radius of the Chicagoland area. This year we should be pretty close to that, but just looking ahead forecast wise, we've got some positive outlooks, and we're hoping to be north of 300 for that 2022, just looking at some of the backlog on the horizon. There's probably not a high rise in downtown Chicago that we haven't worked in. So again, that core market for us is in the downtown Chicago market. 15 million plus square feet. And one big thing for those of you that have a little bit of knowledge on that safety, so that 0.57, the current EMR rating, that's in the top 1% of general contractors in America. So from a safety standpoint, I mean, it's the cream of the crop. I mean, it's super important in our culture, and it starts from the top down. So that EMR rating of all these things, I think on this screen, I think from a safety standpoint, that's probably something that we're most proud of. You got the next slide, please, sir. I think it's always important, and we've adopted, just making sure that we spread this message from not only is ECI a great contractor, but we've also, in 2019, we set up a charitable foundation. And since we've started, we've raised nearly $1 million in 2.5 years, when we support organizations all throughout the Chicagoland area. So it's important for us. It's in our culture. We're constantly volunteering I mean, there's an opportunity, whether you're male, female, you know, there's a ladies group that they do a She Builds thing monthly. So we're very active in our, you know, philanthropic efforts, not only in our money, financial contributions, but time as well. So there's always an opportunity for the staff to do something here at ECI.
Do some helicopter case studies today. So we're going to be looking at 2 projects in specific, CDW and Glamco. So brief overview of what we did with CDW. So Midwest Helicopter was the company that we had contracted to perform this work. The scope of it was removal of an existing exhaust fan, and we're going to hoist a new exhaust fan onto the roof. The purpose of this was because CDW had to build out a second set of restrooms on the 8 floors that we built out for them in the summer of 2020. This took place on May 15th of 2020. I believe it was a Wednesday or a Thursday. It's a little irregular to do a helicopter lift on a weekday. Those were, you know, the height of COVID times where there were no cars on the road. So the city kind of granted us this exemption to be able to do it during the week due to, you know, not a lot of activity downtown. So to jump back in here, so so in total we had 3 helicopter lifts. The first one was to lift the roof curb adapter for the new exhaust fan onto the roof. The second, before the helicopter came down, they picked the old exhaust fan, and then he brought it back, dropped it down onto the truck that was staged, and then before he moved back up, grabbed the new exhaust fan and hoisted it up into place onto the roof on top of the curb adapter that they had just set. The helicopter was on site for 19 minutes. We had a total support staff of 17 individuals between the roof and the ground. The picking capacity of this helicopter is 5,000 pounds. The total cost for the helicopter itself was $20,000. We had 2 ground crew and 1 pilot. So there was a guy on the ground directing the helicopter, and then there's a guy on the roof directing the helicopter. Give you a better picture here looking at this logistics plan. So just want to make sure you guys can like see my cursor right now, right?
Yep.
Awesome. All right. So got a little legend over here. Right here is our pick point where the truck was staged. Over here was our set point. So what we have to do to kind of put this plan in motion, right? So our mechanical contractor that we bid this out to, they come together with this plan. They're the ones that contract Midwest Helicopter, so it's kind of a second tier subcontractor to us, but we're obviously heavily involved in the coordination. The great part about Midwest Helicopter is they handle all the permitting, they handle all the correspondence with the city, whether it's with the police, the fire department, the aldermen, and they also handle notifying all the buildings in the surrounding areas that are active. Again, COVID time, so we got lucky. The only building that was truly active at this time was the one down here. So we didn't have much work to do with that, but either way, you'll notice over here, we've got some alternate landing locations. You know, if anything goes wrong, you've always got to have a second plan. A little bit of a battle to get this parking lot for free for the day, but Midwest was able to negotiate with the owner of the lot, which was awesome. One of the challenges we did face, again, lucky because of COVID, was right over here, and you'll see in some photos I got on the next slide, is this is a church and a school. It's Old St. Pat's. So luckily enough, the school was closed, didn't have to worry about kids being around. That would obviously have been a major hazard if that was around. So from there, day of the lift, cops show up. We've got a lot of one-ways here, so the cops parked off here, over here, and over here. I personally was standing right about right here. I had to direct some people away as the helicopter was going up and down because the cops can't necessarily stop all the foot traffic. But like I said, between a mix of a few people over here by the cop, a few over here, and a few over here, we just needed to block the foot traffic while making sure everything was clear if emergency landing was required.
Ian, a quick question, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
You said 17, I believe, support staff. So
Correct.
that was that, is that the police? Is that executive personnel? All the above?
Yeah, so I don't know, I didn't count the police in that because it's
Okay.
kind of like it's part of the permitting portion of it. The 17 support staff, so 5 of them were with ECI. It was myself, 2 guys who had shown up just from other projects and senior leadership in our company just to help out with the day of the lift. And then we had 2 more guys on the roof. So my superintendent for the project, Nick Udich, and then another assistant superintendent that was on the job with us. Beyond that, the other counts are between pipe fitters and sheet metal installers. And the cost for let's go back here real quick, this $20,000, that doesn't include the cost of the tradesmen or our time. But, the 19 minutes, what happens here, we actually had a slight delay. So Midwest was able to catch us before we had the guys head down. Pretty much Midwest says, hey, we're coming in 5 minutes. We had the freight elevator blocked off to make sure we could get all the guys down very quickly, do the pick, and then they head back up and go back to work. So in reality, we spent about, give it 30 minutes with tradesmen assisting. So they're already on site for the day. So the cost is kind of factored in. And when I talk with the mechanical contractors, they're like, it's really negligible at the end of the day because it's baked into their cost. We did think of alternate routes, and it's tough in the city. When you got big buildings, this building, I believe, forgot exactly, but I think it's about 525 feet high, 17 stories with a mechanical penthouse on top. As you can kind of tell, there's a green roof here, which scared us. So we were potentially thinking of tossing a crane on the side of the building here, and then we would have gantryed it over to this side, had to lift the crane up again, and then craned it and gantryed it over again. So with that, the crane itself would have cost probably about $15,000 between getting it up there, setting it up, taking it down, then moving it up again, resetting it up, and lifting. And that doesn't factor in the cost for our mechanical contractor to have guys there assisting as well, in addition to the cost of the landscaping that we would have most likely destroyed on the roof. So,
and what kind of time are we talking about it if you'd gone the crane route?
If you go the crane route with excluding permitting, let's say it'd take you a day to lift the crane up there, set it up, half a day to lift it, another day to get the crane to deconstruct it and then reconstruct it on that next level, and then another, call it half a day to lift, gantry over, and then set in place, which you would most likely need some type of alternative lift up there to be able to lift this exhaust fan, because the exhaust fan was essentially double the size of the one we were replacing. So overall, it would have taken us about a week to do it.
Okay.
And then, this is just 2 different vantage points from that lift. So as I'd kind of shown you, this is where I was on the ground. You can tell this is Old St. Pat's Church right here where the school was. That helicopter came within like 75 to 100 feet of this building. It was actually kind of nuts to watch. And then this is a vantage point from my superintendent on the roof. Little cool part of the story, again, going back to the COVID times here. Everyone was working from home. A lot of residential places around here. I don't have a good video of it, but if you look to like the right of where the right photo is, the building had a ton of balconies, and every single person was out on their balcony watching this. Because there's not a whole lot of times you get to see a helicopter flying through Chicago like this, especially carrying something. So it's pretty cool to see.
Yeah. Good entertainment value when you're trapped at home.
Exactly. I guess I'll leave it open real quick for any questions on this specific helicopter lift before I move on to the next one.
So I guess I'll just ask you a question. I mean, obviously I know we've done this before, Ian, but you know, how long was your planning, you know, from bid to when this was flagged as a, you know, hey, this is a high risk maneuver here? You know, how long was that process of, you know, where the team was planning? So, and the reason I asked that question for the students is, you know, just you guys are getting ready to do some of your presentations. Again, I'm not sure where you're at with your capstone and all that stuff, but you know, it's just think about this. The preparation it's super important. So go ahead, Ian.
Yeah. So overall, I mean, we were bidding this thing out in February of 2020. Conversations started then between all the mechanical contractors. Hey, what is the most viable way to get this here that's within a reasonable cost? So conversations start then. Low bidder gets awarded. We talked back and forth for about 2 weeks in late February, early March. Landed on the helicopter lift plan, and from there we just they released the Midwest helicopter. Midwest took about a month to procure the permit, notify the city, the buildings, and everything else. Mainly due to COVID, they can actually do this pretty quickly, but COVID kind of messed things up a little there. But really, in reality, we planned this about 2 months in advance. You want to have a good day where you want to set it, and then you have to have an alternate day as well that's cleared by the police department, the fire department, and the alderman of that district. So yeah, about 2 months in advance, we had to put this plan into place and notify the proper individuals to get the correct permits.
Right. So I guess just the reason I asked that, and just so for the students just to understand, I mean, it's a, you know, these things don't just happen with a snap of the finger. There's a lot of moving parts for this to, you know, to go off. I mean, just think about, you know, Ian was talking about having the freight elevator safed off so it would be quick access. I mean, you really got to think through all those things, because obviously time is super important, especially when you're doing these, you know, these critical, you know, picks like this.
Ian or Brian, had you guys worked with Midwest before?
Yeah, so this was my second time working with them. The third time was the next presentation I have, and the first time was like my first like month at ECI. They were like, hey, can somebody come, you know, be a bystander on this Saturday while we do this lift? And I was like, yeah, sure. So I wasn't like directly involved with that one, but they're generally the helicopter company that you will utilize in not only Chicago, but the Midwest. They do take emergency calls to fight fires out on the West Coast. There is another helicopter company, Erickson Air Crane. They have a helicopter that is the second largest in the world. It is a decommissioned military helicopter, and it has a picking capacity of 20,000 pounds. So to give you the scale of that, to remind you, this one has a picking capacity of 5,000 pounds.
Yeah, so
pretty
Mark,
awesome. Yeah, this is.
When I was in Atlanta, we used Erickson for a pick at a high rise that we were doing in Nashville, and then there's a company we used Erickson quite a bit in the Atlanta market, and there was another smaller group called Pirate Air that did some of these smaller weight picks. But Ian brings up another great point. If these picks are happening during the fire season, you may not get it. There may not be any availability. So again, you got to really think through this, especially, you know, 2 months. I mean, a couple of months later, that could have been the fire season, and good luck. You're going to use that crane. It's going to take you a week to get that up there. And so, and the federal government obviously takes precedence over, you know, us lifting a air conditioner up on the top of a building. So,
yeah. Both times I've been involved, we used Midwest for picks. Much much easier picks, right? Not nearly as complicated, not nearly as dense a population or as tall of buildings, but they seem to be one of the go-to companies for the Midwest for sure when it comes to these type of operations.
Yeah, I don't necessarily know that he's called a pilot, but the guy who flies the helicopter, he flew in Vietnam. You'll notice in the video I have of the next case study, the way he maneuvers this back and forth so effortlessly. It's quite amazing.
Any other questions?
Question I had, like safety planning, I guess, because I know you guys said you guys have like emergency landing areas, but was there any other like safety planning or restrictions you had to do with maybe just like wind or just like picks with crane?
Yeah, so to my point earlier, as you can notice, it's a little cloudy that day. We were dealing with rain in the morning, and as I had mentioned, Midwest had given us the heads up at least enough time before that this pick was delayed for about 2 hours. So it was supposed to begin at 8:30, and it took place at 10:30. And that was due to 1, visibility, 2, a little bit of rain, and 3, to your point, wind. So there are precautions in place to delay this as well on the day of.
And who makes that call? Is that the pilot makes that call?
Yes, the pilot makes the call in coordination with the FAA.
Okay. Any other questions? You guys are not normally a quiet group, so you must be intimidated.
We can circle back after the next case study too, but it can be pretty fluid here. All right, so the next one we've got up here, it's for Glambia Performance. I'm going to bounce between slides here. So this was another pick by Midwest Helicopter. This one was actually more of a cost savings than logistically challenging. I guess that's not the right way to put it, but I'll run through it real quick. So we had Midwest out again. This took place on February 27th of 2021. The purpose of this was to hoist 6 new rooftop units, and the weight of those varied from 624 to 1,146 pounds. As I'd stated, we had 6 helicopter picks. The helicopter was on site for 10 minutes. So to give you, we had double the picks, but it was on site for half the time. That is due to the size of the building here. So we are lifting 6 rooftop units onto a warehouse, which is about 45 feet in the air, versus a high rise in Chicago that's about 525 feet in the air. The support staff we had for this was 8. It was 4 guys on the roof, 3 on the ground, or 4 on the ground. And the total cost for the helicopter for the 10 minutes was $8,000. We had 2 ground crew and 1 pilot. So 1 guy in the roof directing, and then 1 guy by the pick truck that you'll see on this logistics plan here. So big thing here. So obviously you guys can tell, big industrial warehouse. The rooftop units were going generally in this area here and generally in this area here. Pick point was over here. Now, I bet you're thinking, like, why couldn't you set a crane up here? Why would, this seems like you have ample amount of space. It's not too high in the air. Kind of true, but not as well. So this ground was determined to be unsuitable to place a crane on in the wintertime with how wet it was outside. And then also the pick distance was limited. So for the size of crane we could get, we still would have had to drop it on the roof, probably right around here. And then we would have spent time gantry and dragging it to its exact location, lifting it and placing it onto the roof curb adapter. So the $8,000 was significantly cheaper than the week to week and a half we were going to spend craning all these up and then dragging them and dropping them into place. Surprisingly enough, I bet none of you probably thought, wow, it's either cheaper to use a helicopter than it is a crane, but depending on the scenario you're in, it could be suitable.
Ian, can I ask a quick question here, just
Yeah.
for the students now? So, was this discovered during was the helicopter solution presented during the bidding phase, or was it discovered after the award? Who was the mechanical contractor?
So a mechanical contractor here was Sherman Mechanical. It was discovered after the award phase. And the
Okay.
challenge here, part of the challenge here was, Glambia, I'm sure a lot of you guys know, like Optimum Nutrition, they do a lot of, this is actually where they make all this protein powder that is in Illinois, and I think probably a good chunk of Indiana as well. They were not very amenable to having a helicopter lift onto the roof because they were worried about the safety behind it. They were willing to pay the extra money to do the crane lift, but we said that we're confident that we can do this in a proper amount of time and in a very safe fashion. So they put their trust in us to get this done, and it went over flawlessly and very successfully.
But what do you think was the reason that they trusted that? I mean, I think just the presentation of the plan.
It was partly the presentation of the plan and their trust in Olson and Gratz, two guys that had a very good relationship with them. When Tom and Mike had sat down with Matt, who was our main contact there, and they explained this, he trusted them to say, all right, we're going to do this in your guys' way, and we'll follow suit. So there's a factor of trust in building relationships with clients that you're going to have to rely on at times when you get out of school here.
Yeah. So Mark and students, this is a long-term client of ours. We've done a ton of work for Glambia, a lot of process piping. I mean, obviously Ian mentioned, they're making, this is where they make the protein for the, and so it's a big, this is their business. So if there's any issues, obviously with the helicopter pig, hence the hesitancy, they're losing revenue. So, but, preparation, the proper prior planning that we presented, it goes a long ways, and just that obviously trust of a long-term relationship.
So it was a Saturday, and I don't know if they operate on a Saturday. So was the main concern just damage to their facility rather than, concerns? Can you speak?
It was mainly worries about damages to the facility, and if something went wrong, where would the helicopter go? They were in the process of investing, north of $50 to $60 million into this facility, on top of the 20 to 30 in raw materials that they have stored in there to begin with. So it's a heavily sensitive area for them, because this is how they make their money at the end of the day. If something were to go wrong, I don't know what their insurance liabilities are behind that. I think that might have been part of the concern. I wouldn't quote me on that, but I think it's part of it.
Yes, I guess speaking on insurance, obviously Midwest Helicopter is heavily insured. Do you guys have to do anything additional as far as insurance on these types of jobs, or is that all pushed onto the subcontractor?
So it's mainly pushed down to the subcontractor, but we have to adhere to the insurance requirements of the building and the client. Now Midwest, they've got a higher insurance policy than anybody else, but that's because they do a high risk job on a day-to-day basis.
Sure.
Is that a common problem you guys kind of run into, is where an owner might be reluctant to do a helicopter pick compared to a traditional crane? It just kind of seems like that could be something that's ran into pretty often.
I don't know that I can accurately answer your question. I've personally only been a part of 4 of these, and the only one that wasn't in Chicago was this one. And that's why I thought it was kind of an interesting case study to provide, doing this out in Aurora at a warehouse.
So
Brian,
Brett, Yeah, I mean, Brett, it's a great question. There's certainly, the biggest thing is the hesitancy, not necessarily obviously if what happens if a helicopter crashes. I mean, I think there's just equally as likely as a crane to, something to happen with a crane. It's both of them are high risk, especially these long, when you're picking these long distances with either a crawler crane that's got the boom set out, or you've got a tower crane that's picking a heavy load. There's always the risk there. I think, a big thing of hesitancy here is the rotor wash on the helicopters that could potentially cause damage to the existing stuff. I mean, you have to understand too, Brett, typically we're dealing with individuals who, not saying that we're we do this stuff every day for a living. And so our risk factor is, we're willing to take some of these bigger risks for these quicker picks and more efficient processes. But, you just have to weigh the risk with the reward. Clients could be like, it's a great idea, but we want the safest bet. And, it depends on what's going on with the client. But typically they're going to defer to us because we're the professionals. Just like Ian mentioned, this specific client, Mike Olson, one of our owners, and Tom Grotz have a long-term relationship with them. And so there was a level of trust and comfort that, hey, this is the best way to proceed here. And they knew that we would stand behind anything that happened.
That's awesome, actually. So my mom is remarried. Her husband now was actually a helicopter maintenance he was a supervisor for a Midwest helicopter. So I think it was like 14 or 15. I actually got the chance to go fly with them, not on a pick, but I remember on one Saturday, like sometimes they'd come back, whether it was from the city or wherever they'd be going, and kind of the same thing like Ian mentioned before, would fly over the house like 100 feet and the whole neighborhood would come out to watch. It was really cool. So I mean, It's awesome to hear all this stuff kind of on the construction side of things where I had never really thought of before.
Sure. And you have to think about too, Brett, like, I mean, these are not just cowboys flying a helicopter. You know what I mean? I mean, these guys are the most professional people. I mean, think about the pre-checks that go into before you even take that bird off the ground. I mean, these guys there's rules and regulations in place for any airplane, helicopter, anything that before it takes off, all the checklists have to be completed. And if something's not right, they're not going to lift off the ground. So, I mean, the safety, they're really safe. I would say I wouldn't say there's any difference than, being on the ground. I mean, there's still the risk of picking from the ground, like Ian said. So think about if that unsuitable soil for that crane, what if they'd have set up there, and when that thing would have, when those outriggers would have pushed down, I mean, that thing could have sunk in the ground and easily tipped that crane over. So, when you're flying a bird there, you've got a lot more data that you can, gather, but, putting a crane on the ground, sometimes people don't think about the soil. So.
Definitely, yeah, it's a really good point. I just remember I went into the hangar a couple times, and like you said, the inspection list was just a mile long, and I can't remember how many thousands and thousands of hours they said the pilots needed to have. So it's really cool. It definitely seems like a very professional company.
Oh yeah,
they definitely are. So real quick, I'll just kind of give you guys an example of one of the rooftop units being lifted here.
right in place. I mean, that gives you a great perspective of what Ian was talking about. So can you imagine having to, you pick that with a crane on the ground, and then look at how far you've got to, you know, that one specific unit. I mean, that's a long ways. That's a lot of labor, and a lot of equipment on the roof, and a lot of room for error. I mean, Ian, what was the total time from off the ground to setting that?
Off the ground, setting it. I don't know the timestamp here. I
That'd
think
be less than-
it was probably less than that, Brian. It's probably, I mean, by the time you rig it, get it up, yeah, it probably took about a minute or so, 75 seconds to 60 to 75 seconds.
Yeah. So
It just, I've seen you guys show this before, and I'm always stunned that the operator, you know, looks like it's swinging like a pendulum, but the way he can operate the helicopter to bring it to close to a dead stop before it gets to the crew on the roof is just incredible. I mean, because it'd be really easy to get somebody hurt if you don't have a great operator. I mean, it's like having a great machine operator or crane operator, but this just level of difficulty seems phenomenal.
yeah,
And then he
I
just
mean,
backs it- he
probably
backs it up.
set that place. Sorry.
No, I was just saying, like, too, he backs the helicopter up right after. My understanding, that's not something that's easily done.
So it backs up back to where it was at.
Yeah. Usually people gotta maneuver and turn around. I don't know. That's my understanding.
Yeah. 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 It's
I
pretty
have
cool watching.
I have a question kind of with the cost associated with it. So how do they kind of charge? Do they charge like per pick, or like how complicated it is, or kind of the risks associated with it, or how does that work?
So part of what's factored into the cost is any type of permit you got to pull. So as you can tell, the one in Chicago is a little bit more expensive than the one that we had to do out in Aurora. Another factor that plays into it is the gas cost. So with CDW, he was lifting equipment, 525 feet in the air, or plus, because he's got to go a little bit above. Over here at Glambia, he was maneuvering back and forth, up and down, a lot quicker, and the units were a little bit lighter, so he didn't have to use as much gas. So on top of that too, they do have their own labor costs. So, for the ground crew to travel out, and then the pilot's time, that's factored in as well.
And the ground crew does all the rigging.
The ground crew, yes. The one, I wish I had one of the set point right below, but yeah, he'll do the rigging of each unit with the assistance of your sheet metal guys who are there, and then the one on the roof helps unrig it, and then he gives a little hand motion with the pilot looking down at him at the same time as a walkie-talkie to be able to go back and then repeat the process again.